Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's guest is Dr. Lauren McClenney-Rosenstein with Dyslexia Greenbook and Resilience Unlimited. Dr. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell us a little bit about Dyslexia Greenbook and Resilience Unlimited and how it got started.
Yes. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Frances, for having me on the show. Very excited to be here. I love talking about all things special ed and dyslexia, all that good stuff. Well, actually, since we scheduled this, I actually have switched my DBA, my doing business as, so it's really just with Dr. Lauren, because what I realized was a lot of my services, it's all wrapped around with me. So I do provide those dyslexia intervention services, but I also do ADHD executive functioning coaching, which was more of the Resilience Unlimited side of things, because there's a lot of resiliency. And, as you know, with special education and learning disabilities and kind of just finding your strength in all of that. So I just kind of boiled it all into one. So it's really now with Dr. Lauren.
That's awesome. No, I love it because it works.
It does. It's simple.
Exactly. And it's not because, like, for me, dyslexia, all right, I get the dyslexia part, Resilience Unlimited,
Exactly. Yeah.
So now it's all. So then what services do you provide? So you're tutoring?
Yeah, so I use the term tutoring very loosely. I am actually a certified educational therapist. So what I've found is that term is very colloquially used on the West Coast. So when parents find me, depending on how they find me, looking for, let's just say, literacy intervention services, they're like, I need an Orton Gillingham tutor. And of course, that's what they're looking for. But then when they hire me, they realize I do far more than that. It's more of a holistic approach. And if you break apart education and therapy and put it together, you can kind of assume, it's a therapeutic environment to really meet that child where they are. So I do provide Orton Gillingham intervention. I'm actually in the process of working on my certified level through the academy. So those of you who are literacy practitioners, how much work it is to get to the next level of certification. So I'm hoping by the end of August, I can change the letters, the alphabet soup after my name. And then I also provide some executive functioning coaching, not just to students, but also to women of color, more specifically Black women, because that's my story. And I struggled, and I was like, hey, if I struggled, I know there are other Black women and other marginalized women out there who really could use that support and also have that reflection of like, wow, you're successful. I can be successful and work through my neurodiversity too.
Right. Yeah, I know. And I love that you go into that a little bit. You want to go into your story a little bit?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's actually been very liberating to share my story over the past, I would say probably now a year and a half. So my story goes all the way back to my really from day one, but my senior year of college was when I was like, what is going on? Like, I always struggled in school. My I actually had tutors most of my life. I was a Sylvan Learning Center child. I don't know if anyone who knows Sylvan Learning Center, but I was there for many, many years and just nothing really worked. I worked hard. I just didn't know what was wrong. I was always told I was a social butterfly. I had so much energy. I just couldn't focus. I always thought I was dumb. I just couldn't figure it out. And so I was a psychology major undergrad, and I was sitting in this abnormal psychology class, and I saw these signs and symptoms of then in the textbook ADD. And I was like, I really think that's me. And I've always been a very introspective, like curious person to be like, what's wrong with me? Like, why do I tick? Like, what I need a label, if you will. And so I was grateful I didn't have to pay the thousands of dollars, as we know how much these psych reports are. So I went, and grad students needed students, obviously, to, practice their
Right.
skill set. So I ended up getting diagnosed with ADHD. My parents had to fill out forms. They weren't too happy about it. I think at the time, in retrospect, I think they were taking it very personally. Like they did something wrong. Like, maybe if you just studied more, maybe if you just focused more. It was very hard for me to take that in, but it was very freeing that I got the diagnosis. But what's really crazy about it was I was on a Division I track scholarship, full track scholarship to Syracuse University. And I needed to get help. Once I had this diagnosis, I'm like, well, what do? I got to navigate this and figure it out. Right. And we know this is a process. So I was put on medication. Like it wasn't Ritalin, but it was Concerta. I lost my personality. I was losing weight like crazy. Yeah, it was the first time I ever made honor roll, though, or the dean's list or whatever. And I was like, I don't know if this is worth it, Like, my coach was like, your times are dropping. It was awful. And so because of that, I didn't have support. I didn't know which way was up. I was 21 years old. I just cold turkey stopped taking the medication and literally dove into special education.
Yeah.
And didn't do anything about my own neurodiversity until 2023.
Wow.
And it wasn't until, I'm always fighting for these families. I'm fighting for these kids.
Yeah.
I'm so passionate about it. And I couldn't understand that that was my story in a different lens. But it wasn't until I became, I had my own business that I realized I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm procrastinating. Like I realized being a teacher, the schedule kept me on schedule. And all of a sudden I had to not have time blindness. Yeah. I had to all the ADHD things. So I ended up talking to my regular therapist I had for a while. She's like, maybe get an ADHD therapist, maybe get back on some medication. So I did that. I weaned off the medication. I'm doing more natural, holistic things, but I embrace now who I am in my journey. And I help other women see hey, this is what I did. I ignored it for 17 years. And now here I am. And then my youngest daughter was just diagnosed with ADHD. So I'm like, okay, I got the special ed approach. I mean, you understand this as a mom, all the different things. I was just like, I got the mom approach. So that part of my business is very personal because I realized over the years, people would say, well, what's your dyslexia story? And I'm like, I'm not dyslexic. I'm just very passionate about the underdogs of the education system. And I realized, I probably should share my story.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, it's interesting that you say, because going back, my story a little, which I don't know how much I ever went into that part of my story, but growing up, I didn't think I was smart because I couldn't spell and my grammar wasn't good.
Right.
And I originally wanted to be a psychologist major.
But
I didn't think I was smart enough.
Oh,
yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Always loved kids, always loved special ed, went into education, not saying that you're you know what I mean? Intellectually that there's
right.
Went into education because I also wanted to be a mom and wanted to, all of that, and went into education. Again, didn't think I was smart enough for law school and all of that. And it wasn't until much later on that I was like, and honestly, I never said I'm going to law school. Mm-hmm. I said, let me take the LSATs and see what happens.
And there you go. What happened?
And then one thing led to another. I wound up in law school and wound up on law review. So obviously there's some smartness in there.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't because of the way today's school systems are.
Right. And I actually didn't think I was smart until I got a 4.0 in my doctorate program. And so, my undergrad grades were awful because I just didn't know, I didn't know anything to know. And everything was tests and I had the worst test anxiety. Grad school was education. So I had more like a 3.5 when I graduated, and it was special ed. So I was very passionate, but it wasn't until I was working on my doctorate, I had a 4.0 and I was like, wow, okay, I am smart.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I love what I do, because I want all children to know that they're smart.
Yes.
And I don't care what your IQ is, 130 or 30. Yes. You're smart. There's something in there, and that we have to tap into on the IEPs and making sure we get there.
Yes.
So, and I know you said late diagnosis and then the Black community. Does that happen often?
Yeah. So let me tell you, Frances, I've had this conversation with a lot of clients, and I think what it really boils down to is systemic racism, the pipeline to prison, and just historically Black folks not really trusting the system. You know, if you really think back to like the Tuskegee, you know, what was it? The I can't think of the word, but it was basically planting all these things in Black folks and let's see how it turns out. And so I think that's a main reason why a lot of Black males don't trust doctors. But it's just we don't want to talk about, oh, well, so-and-so is slow at talking, or so-and-so is a little different in this area. They'll be fine. You know, Uncle so-and-so grew out of it. And I think it's a defense mechanism of like, let's keep it in our community. We've got each other. We don't need to talk about that. You'll be okay. You just need to focus more. You know, that's what I kept getting a lot. And I think it's the stigma of, more than often, Black kids are misdiagnosed. And a lot of it comes from the lack of awareness, you know, the biases and the systemic racism. So maybe there's a child, a young, let's say a dark-skinned Black boy who's got anger issues. Maybe we should look and see, like, can he read? Because maybe that's really what the underlying issue is. Maybe he doesn't have an emotional disability. And I actually had a kid on my caseload when I was teaching middle school, and man, and I know, Frances, you can relate to this. You look at a report or something, and then it's just, it looks awful. It paints an awful picture of this child. Yep. And I would always say, I don't read psych reports until I've spent a month with that kid, because it's just not fair.
Yeah,
you know, it's not fair.
It's a little snapshot.
Exactly. And I'm just like, I'm not going to do it. And so this was a transfer student. So I needed to get up to speed. And I was just told by, you know, my team leader and the administrative team, like, this kid's got an emotional disability and he was, you know, in juvie, like the whole rap sheet. Right. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And of course, a lot of my colleagues, they were all white women. So they were all like, oh, Lauren, you'll be great with him. And I'm just like, okay. I'm like, I can read between the lines here. This was the kindest, quietest kid. And after like a few weeks of being in because I co-taught 2 classes with him, I saw 0 anger issues. If anything, this kid was really pleasant, really nice, but just was in his shell. And I think what turned out was he was in a very volatile environment at the time, which is why he moved to this school district. And I think he was able to not be in like fight, flight, or freeze all the time. And so it turned out he actually just had like a learning disability. And he just needed, you know, he had some psych services and all of that. And literally we removed that diagnosis after we got a lot of data and just saw, I think he was a specific learning disability in reading and writing. And I'm just like, wow, this is what happens though. We misdiagnose our Black kids and then they get put in the system.
I fight so hard against the ED label.
Yes.
With our Black and brown, especially boys.
Yes.
Always. Because I'm like, it's a reality. It's hard for them in life to begin with.
Yeah. Yes.
And having that ED label
is
just, you know, the pipeline to prison, unfortunately. And I fight so hard constantly. All of my clients know it. The school systems all know it at this point, because ED isn't what it used to be. In the sense of, and what I also go back to is when you look at behaviors, 99% of the time, there's 2 reasons for behaviors of kids in school. 1, they're so far ahead, they're bored out of their mind.
Yes.
Okay. 2, they're so far behind, they have no clue what's going on and they don't want anybody else to know.
Yep. It's always those 2. You're absolutely
and look
right.
at now, okay, we have all these behaviors. Let's look at the underlying. And it happened. I had a kid that at one school, the parents were divorced. One of my clients, at one school, they labeled him and, oh, he's a behavior issue. ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, ODD. Well, once we dug in, there was a learning disability there.
Yeah, exactly.
ADHD.
Exactly.
Right? He goes to a new school, and the new school's like,
different kid.
What are these behaviors?
Yeah, exactly. Right? That's what I experienced. I was like, I don't know.
Right? Like, exactly. Like, you change the environment. And honestly, in that situation, I think it was definitely biased from the first school. Knowing what the schools are and just writing them off. And like, I will never use the expression boys will be boys, because I think that is just a cop-out.
I hate that.
Right?
I don't understand where that comes from. I think it's people. I actually had a mom friend of mine reference that. I think her husband used it about their their son who just got diagnosed. And I was just like, does that make him feel better to just say that? Like, and I know a lot of it is, it's guilt and shame. Did I inflict this? Or, and you probably see this a lot too, but I've talked to thousands of moms over the last 15 years. And depending on when they got their child diagnosed with dyslexia, it's the mom guilt. If they were 10, they're like, why did I not see it? And it's like, you saw what you saw and you knew what you knew at that time.
Exactly.
And that's a whole other conversation as well. We can't beat ourselves up about that. Yeah. But I agree with you. That's not a good comment. It's very like, let's just brush it under the rug. He'll be fine.
Right. Or he can behave like that because he's a boy.
No.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Like, boys will be boys and girls will be girls, but that's not an excuse for behavior.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that the behavior is bad or that there needs to be discipline or whatever it is, but boys will be boys is not an acceptable behavior. If a child is not behaving correctly, whether it's chosen behavior or disability behavior, it's still something that needs to be addressed.
Yes, I agree.
In the way that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
And again, not saying punishment or anything like that, because, as we know, within it's disability related, but look, why are kids misbehaving? Behavior is communication.
Yeah.
Needs not being met.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Like, what is that need that child needs right then? And let's address that need so that they learn how to handle and meet their own needs without having to have the behaviors.
Yep. No, absolutely. Right? I agree with that. And I just, as you're talking, I'm thinking about just students in the past that I've had to just stay consistent, because really the behavior, it's hard. It's hard to kind of push through it. But and I always say, once the kids trust and know you're not going anywhere, that's when they really know, like, okay, all right, yeah, I do need to change this behavior because I'm not pushing the buttons that I thought I would be pushing because, this person is, and some of it could be abandonment issues too. Well, I'm just going to push this person away because maybe I don't have this at home or whatever it is. But I agree. Behavior is communication. And I do feel, and in this day and age, it is a little bit more challenging with teachers. And I get it. I left teaching the classroom in public school actually in 2019. So that was right before the pandemic. I went back into schools during the pandemic, but I was on the administrative team as a learning specialist. So I was more manning, like, working with one-on-one with students and doing like teacher trainings and stuff like that. So I know that it's a lot different now. I know that education's shifting with the new administration and all of that. And it's scary. And I think, knowing that you and I have the background and information as moms and as also, experts in our field, we can really have a different perspective and landscape on like, okay, what is it that parents need? What is it that, I forgot how old your child or children are, but I have an elementary age child. So I'm like, okay, I was like, what can my husband and I do? Cause he's an educator to make sure she's still getting what she needs, because we see there's some gaps there, but we also know that her teacher's overworked. There's too much on her plate, so.
Yeah. Mine are 2nd and 5th grade.
Okay. So I 1st grade.
Yeah. And my 5th grade. So my 2nd grader got diagnosed right after kindergarten. So my 5th grader didn't get diagnosed until after 3rd grade.
Okay.
I knew there was something with my older one, and she's okay with me sharing because I have that conversation with her all the time.
Absolutely.
And she's so open about her autism.
That's good. She's comfortable then.
We were doing a cookie booth this weekend, and she sold 1,000 boxes of cookies herself.
Good for her.
Yeah. So crazy.
She's a little entrepreneur over there.
She is, right? And so she's having this conversation with somebody. And they're like, you are going to go places, because of her sales pitch and how she was doing it.
Oh my God.
Like, she goes, I'm going to open a school for kids like me, kids that have autism, because there really needs to be better schools for us.
I
was just like, yes. I mean, the mom looked at me and was like, you've got a good kid. I'm like, I know she is.
And that's you though. But like, because she sees what you're doing. Just like, and I have an older one, she's 21 and school wasn't hard for her. She had her other struggles, but like both of my girls see like what I'm doing and how much of an impact that makes. And so your kids see that too. So of course she's going to have a voice and say something. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I was just like, that's my girl.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anything that I, said, but she also sees it because
Yeah.
we've been visiting schools. She wants to go to her public school for middle school.
Okay.
But we all know how middle school is. So we'll
Yes,
see.
we do. Yes,
But
we
we
do.
have backup options that we're looking at. We're experimenting. And she was seeing that there weren't schools that would fit her needs
Support.
as much
Yeah.
as.
Yeah.
There were a couple that we went and visited that we really liked, but still, I don't know. But she sees it also, and she hears me talking about it, that like we have kids waiting for placements, but there's not anything out there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But so it was, she's so funny. But there was the movie, somebody recommended it on the show, Out of My Mind.
I don't know that one. No.
Oh, you have to go see it. So it's about a child that is nonverbal. She has cerebral palsy. I think she's cerebral palsy.
Okay.
In a wheelchair, and she's in a special ed classroom. And then it's taught, and then she's mainstreamed in on this trial experiment, and she's finally given an AAC device that actually allows her to fully communicate.
Wow.
And this story is amazing.
Wow.
And my kids watched it and were like, oh. And I turned to them, I'm like, that's what mommy does. I help girls like that don't have that voice. I help give them a voice.
Yeah.
And they it's like, if you haven't watched,
very emotional. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I cried. My husband cried. It was that is a movie because it's the reality of going back to biases. She was in a wheelchair and nonverbal. So what do people automatically think?
She's stupid. She's stupid. She has no thoughts going on.
Right? Exactly. And when she was getting things, right. Oh, the aide was doing it for her. The aide was doing the right answers.
Wow.
And right. So this movie was.
I'll have to look into it. What's
at Disney Plus.
Okay, perfect. We have Disney Plus. Wow. Okay.
It was amazing. It was amazing. But like that's the thing, is like talking about biases and what people are afraid of it. And going back to like in the Black community, like of course, like I get it, because how were they treated? Like how, and what are the stories you've heard of, and it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. Yes. And the other piece to really touch on too, is the mental health aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I know for me, I struggled. I've always been a very optimistic, upbeat, happy person. So people probably wouldn't say like, oh, you seem depressed in high school. But, I know there were moments where I was just like, why are all my friends talking about getting 1550s on SATs and I can barely break 1,000? Like I took, and then I'd get the whole, like, you're a jock, you'll go to college for track. And I'm like, I don't want to be known as that. But then fast forward to some clients that I've worked with, and this is fascinating to me. Like I am learning so much about my adult clients where I've actually had some unemployed women with ADHD, and I never thought of that but it makes sense, because it's like if you struggle with time and paying bills and all of those things that are life skill, executive functioning skills, you might actually lose your job. And so it's just fascinating to me to see it working from the lens of, I've always worked with elementary, middle, and high school kids. Now it's like, oh no, you're in your 30s and you're struggling. Let me help you kind of just organize your life here. And it comes with the mental, like the heaviness of like, I actually was talking to a colleague of mine who's neurodiverse, and he said there's a huge, I don't know your thoughts on this, but there's a huge neurodiverse population that falls into the cannabis field because they just want to quiet the brain,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I get it, the self-medicating thing, but really we need to get to the root cause of like, why are we feeling, unproductive? Why are we feeling like we aren't worthy? Like all of the things. And so a lot of my adult coaching, I wouldn't say it's therapy, because I definitely will not, say I'm an educational therapist, but like I'm not a licensed therapist. But it really is all about like, well, are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating like water, like all of these things. So the mental health, like part of this whole undiagnosed dyslexia, and with dyslexia, it's even worse because it's like, well, I can't read. so I can't apply for jobs. You know,
Right.
I can't write, so I can't really send emails where people are going to take me professionally because I have so many typos. So
Right.
there's so many stigmas around all of those, like both, you know, ADHD and dyslexia, and they tend to go hand in hand, as you well know. But I just feel like it's a lot bigger in the Black community. I mean, I interviewed tons of people a while ago on my YouTube channel years ago. I just, my thing was, I was hired at this specialized private school in Atlanta. It was my very first teaching job. I loved it, still dear in my heart. But I remember looking around being like, I'm the only Black teacher here. And is this only a white people thing? Like, I couldn't understand. I was like, all the kids in the class were, after a year or two, I saw like a sprinkle of Black kids.
Yeah.
But then I went on this quest of like, I'm pretty sure they're dyslexics in Egypt. And so I found a whole bunch of people all over the world that I would just get on my show. They would interview, they would tell their story. A lot of them are like, this is the first time I've told my story. Thank you so much for giving me this platform. And for me, I was just like, well, everybody has a voice,
Right.
I want you to have a voice. So it was just really interesting to kind of see how it manifested in other, countries, and how it's really the same thing. It's just like here in America, we don't want to talk about it. We don't know how to deal with it. Well, these people just are going to go do that. They're going to go do a vocational job because they, can't read or write or whatever. I know I just went on a tangent here, but I just like,
you're fine.
So much that just kind of came to my mind with, just the stigma around dyslexia isn't just a white people thing. Oh, I know where I was going with that. I interviewed a colleague of mine. Actually, he is the CEO of Noticeability. Dean, I always pronounce his last name wrong. I think it's Bragonier. It's a very fancy last name, but love him. He's a great guy. He got diagnosed with dyslexia at like 7 because his mom was a school psychologist and she saw that there were issues there. So I have found in my time of talking to dyslexics that there are people who will say it's a superpower, and there are people who will say that it robbed me of my life. And what I found was the people who were diagnosed early, who their self-esteem wasn't crushed, they got the interventions. They were like, yeah, I can do this. I'm dyslexic. Meanwhile, you take people who are diagnosed in their 40s or 30s, and they're like, this robbed me of everything happy. I could actually like see myself. So it's really, it's really interesting to look at both perspectives, because neither one are wrong. It's just what you experience. But I know in the Black community, it's like, okay, that's not always happening, unless there's the education around, hey, so-and-so had this, hey, we have the capital to go shovel out $5,000, for a psych report and pay for these services, which I'm sure your services aren't cheap and mine aren't cheap. So it's just, there's so much wrapped around that.
And it's also the community knowledge of it.
Yeah.
I want to say and like I joke around all the time being a Jewish woman that Jewish women are born with a Xanax prescription of anxiety, right? But that's our community. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I have a friend of mine that's Black, person of color, and she went to a mainly white Jewish school. And then everybody talked about therapy and going to the therapist. And she was like, what's wrong with me that I don't go to therapy?
That's so funny.
Where did you grow up, and what was acceptable? What was the community, and what was, what did you know about?
Right.
It's just, like, as looking at autism, it used to be if you weren't diagnosed before the age of 3, you didn't have autism. Well, how many kids, the parents didn't know this wasn't normal.
Exactly.
And didn't go to school till 5,
Yeah.
How much in the community was it, like, is it openly talked about? Is that the culture?
Yeah. And that's the tough part. That's definitely the tough part. And I think there are, I found a lot of people of color who are trying to talk more about these things because it's not embarrassing. I mean, it is embarrassing for those who just don't know that there is podcasts like this. There are resources. It's okay. We're all different. But I just think, generationally we've evolved. I feel like, millennials and whatever, Gen Zers, and I guess our kids are the Gen Alpha. It's like all the different generations. But, hopefully there's some evolving around talking about these things so it's not taboo. I mean, I dated a guy in college, and he told me, he was like, I just want you to know I have Asperger's. I didn't know what that was. I was like, what's that? And he's just like, I don't want to talk about it. Look it up. And I was just like, okay. And I looked it up. And then, over time he opened up, like he didn't read until he was in 5th grade. Like everything was just like in his head, but he was like really, really, really smart. But, he was diagnosed, I guess, in the early 90s, and really autism wasn't talked about back then, So it was just interesting how that was, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago that he said, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but great. I was very open and accepting about it.
Exactly. And that's what, like, I teach my kids, and I want my kids to know, is that it's okay. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's just your brain works differently. And it was interesting. We had a conversation last night, and my younger one was, what was it again that I have? And I said, because she's ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and anxiety. Okay. Is the little one. And she's like, but everybody's brain works differently, because we were talking about Hannah's autism. And I said, it's just the way her brain works differently. And it's just like, well, everybody's brain works differently. So does everybody have autism? And I'm like, no, but I see where you're going with that. But like, yes, everybody's brain works differently. And that's why it's normal. It's just her brain works more like this characteristic, just like your brain looks more like this characteristic. Yeah. But it was so insightful for her, because I hate labels. Yeah. We have to have them, unfortunately.
I was going to say, we need them so we can know how to help, or how to divide and conquer. I don't know, but I get what you're saying now.
I don't even think we need them to know how to help. We need them because IDEA is written that you have to fit into one of these categories.
Well, exactly. Yes.
But when you look at a profile, with ADHD kids, autistic, like all of them, when you've met one neurodiverse child, you've met one neurodiverse child.
I say that too.
Because none are the same. So it's not even like we can say, ADHD kid, this is how we help them. Autistic kid, this is how we help them. Because it's not. Yeah. Because what you do for one isn't going to work for the other.
Exactly. And you have to know the student. You have to know the child. That's really what I would always tell parents when I was a special educator in schools. But obviously now when they hire me, it's private. So they get that one-on-one, and I get to really know their child. And then I kind of help them with IEP meetings, or, hey, have you tried this? Have you noticed that? And I tell parents, I said, I work with a wide range. It's a spectrum, just like autism with dyslexia. Some are severely dyslexic and it just takes a little longer. And some might just need 2 years of intervention, maybe even just like 50 hours of intervention. And it's not a one size fits all model. And I've learned that, for a while in my business, I was like, there's no way I could ever package this. Like, here's a curriculum. Like, no, I truly am like, what does Frances need? Okay, we're going to do this. Oh, we're going to pivot. Oh, we're going to do that, and that's the beauty of the work that I love to do, because I love to really understand who the child is, who the adult is. What are your needs at that time? So
yeah, that's so true, because, and I love that you work with adults also, because I see it 100% and it makes sense. Like, obviously adults need accommodations and stuff like that, and they know to, but they also need somebody to help them set it up the right way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's okay to use accommodations, adults. Like, we all need them. I have my Apple Watch. Whenever I do laundry, I have to put, or else I'm going to get sucked into something else work wise or whatever. And I forget. So we all need to be kinder to ourselves about things that we need.
And that it's okay. That it's okay that we need. I keep joking around that I need somebody to run my household, because I can't, I was at a text last night, a WhatsApp group, and the parents are like, is the Zoom meeting over? I'm like, what Zoom meeting? And thankfully, there's always that one parent that's like, oh, here is a copy of the slide. Yeah. Picture of,
exactly. That's hilarious.
And that's why mom groups are so fabulous, because we all have our strengths.
Yes.
And pull stuff up.
Yes.
So I want to go through, like, if people, listening to the show are like, hey, I need your help, or my
Yeah.
kid needs your help. What's the
Sure.
best way? Well, what area do you work with in the sense of geographically?
So in-person services, I'm in Ellicott City, Maryland. So I have some clients that are in neighboring districts, and I don't have my own brick and mortar. I kind of do things at a local coffee shop, but I have found that a lot of my clients are virtual. And, if we're looking at the dyslexia side of things, I recommend middle school and higher for virtual, especially with those high schoolers and busy schedules. It's just easier to just pop online.
Yeah.
And then the coaching, that's all virtual. That doesn't have to be in person. I do find a lot of my elementary aged caseloads, parents want it in person, which I do recommend, because that, I have the cards, I have, the magnet boards, I have things where they need that tactile touch. But yeah, I mean, I've worked with clients in Texas, in Washington, D.C. So I have, and I don't know if you'll have links kind of attached to this. I assume you will. Yes. So I have like a link tree, and you'll see that there are two different discovery calls. One will say like dyslexia or educational therapy, and another one will say ADHD coaching. I also have to do a little shout out. I am making candles now for the neurodiverse community.
Right. I wanted I wanted to hear about those.
Yes.
I saw that.
So this is my ADHD at its best. Like, now I feel like I'm in my brilliance, because I'm not in a box anymore. I can do whatever I want, whatever makes my heart sing. So long story short, I started making candles around Christmas time for the holidays, for fun. And I was giving them away. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if I can make this a business. And so of course I did my research, hyper focused on it. And I decided I really wanted luxury candles, because I've always loved candles, but I've also been trying some things with my little one to calm her nervous system down when she has bad days at school. Because a lot of her issues are behavioral with her ADHD. I think for her, it's the first thing you said, she's bored. I think she's so bored that it's like, okay. So I'm always trying to bring her levels down before bed and all of that. So I really love certain scents, and we know the olfactory gland, and that can kind of calm some things down and all of that. So I started making just a variety of scents, and it's kind of gotten bigger. I have candles. If you're local and you're listening, I have candles at Sukasa in Ellicott City on Main Street. And yep. And I also have an Etsy page and a website and all of that. But I have like signature fragrances that I did research that I know will like calm the nervous system, uplifting, grounding scents. Like I have like 6 signature fragrances, and then just others that I can just kind of sample through, seasonal scents and all of that. So that's kind of my
definitely putting those links. And I know that's where I'm going shortly.
Yes, thank you. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. And I know that it's for the greater good. And I can reach a bigger population, because not everybody needs my dyslexia and ADHD services, but there are some people maybe who are like, I really want to just calm my brain down. And also they're eco-friendly. Like, I'm very cautious about, I don't use like toxic stuff, and I use coconut soy wax and cotton wicks, and it's just quality materials that I want people to experience. And that's why I changed my DBA to With Dr. Lauren. So it's Candles with Dr. Lauren.
Love it.
So yes.
That is so awesome. Yeah,
Thank you.
Awesome. So we are going to have all of those links below.
Absolutely.
This has been so amazing. And I'm like, I need you back on my show again, because I feel like
we could.
Hours.
Absolutely. I love this. This was great, Frances. I really enjoyed it. And I hope those of you who are listening took some nuggets away and, found some value in this conversation. Because we definitely could talk in depth about several conversations.
I know. And now I'm like, we probably need to get together and get it, because we're not that far. And get our kids together.
Yes.
But thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.